I will try to exit as silently as possible.
Okay.
All right.
I think that goes for all of us. But yeah, acknowledged.
Okay. Oh. That's the wrong thing that I linked.
Leave it up! Leave it up!
leave it.
Amazing.
I hope that was I hope that was on the record. Please tell me that was on the record.
It was recorded, but it's not visible.
That's hilarious.
No, you should do a thing. You should clip that. You should do a small little image of this when you stick it on YouTube.
Oh no.
Oh yes.
I never edit this stuff because it would mean I would need to download the recording, which is more than several gigabytes usually, and then edit it and then save it and then upload it, which takes several hours on YouTube. So I just export it directly from Twitch to YouTube.
Okay.
But yeah, we will start in a few minutes anyway, because first people have to come in, and I'm posting on social media.
There we go. Push to talk enabled. Hopefully we won't have any weird door slams.
Ooh. Okay, so we go. Rick, yes, usually only I speak doing flight school. However, this is a topic that I think can be best explored by several people. I have too much stuff on my desk. Have to make some
Come to
room.
my world.
Okay, that's better.
Oh.
The wonders of throwing stuff over your shoulder onto the bed.
Like you do.
That's beautiful, Ida.
I don't think you want to go there, Fracas.
Ooh, Natalia might join us.
Ooh,
Natalia Jagielska?
Yes,
Ooh.
just posted on Twitter.
Okay, that'll be interesting.
Ah, there she is. Hello there. And Jackosaurus is here as well. Nature's companion. Good. Good.
Oh, there they are. Yes.
Yes, a pterosaur person.
Is that right?
Okay, I think we slowly can start with this. Hello everyone to the third Peristream Flight School stream. Today we don't talk about perspective again, but there will be a second perspective stream in the future because we only covered the basics last time. Today we talk about critique, how to give it, how to deal with it, and other topics that go into that direction. And the reason why we do this is that we have a lot of problems in the paleo community with critique, with giving critique, with dealing with critique, receiving critique, because most people that go into paleo never learn how to give or deal with it. And of course then there are platforms like Twitter where it is especially easy to hurt people. Just because messages are usually very short. The way the whole threat system works is chaotic and horrible, and nobody really likes it, to be honest. So, yeah, we will look into ways of critiquing, how to do it better, and how to deal with it when it's not good, because that's way too often the case. And even though we try, especially here on the PaleoStream server, we will never arrive really at a point where it's perfect. So knowing how to react to a critique is, I think, something valuable to learn. But yeah, let's dive into it. Me and Ida worked on a document some time ago, and we discussed it quite a bit. And also Grace and Zach had access to this and were able to critique this document about critiques. Oh yeah, and Fracas is here as well.
Yes, we're very meta here.
Exactly.
Yep.
Fracas is our dungeon master.
Thank you.
Fitting title.
No, but because Fracas is also has experience with dealing with groups of people, I think he
Yes.
is a very
I went to a school for illustration.
yeah, and having such a you might say classical background helps a lot with these sorts of things, especially for some stuff you might do after the stream. So people on Discord, you are welcome to stay a little bit longer after the stream. Let's dive into it with some basics. When you are giving critique, and oh, sorry, I had something with gas in it. When you give a critique, your basic stuff is like act in good faith. This should be self-explanatory, and you should ask yourself if you should give critique and when is the best time to give it. All these little text bits, by the way, are directly taken from the document me and Ida worked on, and some of them might be a little bit weird in their wording because it's oftentimes also just asking ourselves how should we do this, and so some stuff we might clarify in dialogue. So you should always have a look at the artwork you're seeing online, or also when you see it in person and the artist is available. If the artist even wants critique. And that is a difficult thing because most of the time this is not really specified. And so most people just see this as an invitation to give critique. And I don't think we can get rid of this sentiment. So most of the time people just give critique if it's wanted or not. But we I will show you guys at the end of the stream that we are working in the moment, at least here on the server, on a system that might go around these tendencies that we have in the community. You also should remember what you as an artist, or if you, also when you're not an artist, because that's also the case, that non-artists critiquing artists, that happens a lot. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, there's plenty of people who critique films without doing films themselves. That's just a thing that happens. But think about, okay, what would you like to hear? How would you like to be addressed when it comes to your own work? And also consider the age or skill level of the artist in front of you. Don't expect people to jump from kindergarten to Michelangelo because you gave them some advice. That's never happening. Except for people who plagiarize. And separate the artist from the work. Very important, because we oftentimes judge people differently based on how well we know them and how much we like them. More on that later. Okay, I also have here a beautiful little example that somebody made some time ago, which was one of the reasons why we made this stream a little bit earlier than first intended, that boils down a little bit the usual conversation you can see all over social media when it comes down to critiquing paleo art. And that is somebody posts a piece of paleo art which then is harshly criticized for minor details, sometimes also bigger details, but it's mostly the biggest problem we see here is how these issues are addressed, if they are issues, because sometimes it's also just people being like, it's this way, and then it turns out they don't know that latest paper and blah blah blah. But you most of you guys will know this situation of the comments going wild over things that shouldn't matter that much when you really think about it, but it happens. So next point is then, of course, when you come something across that you want to critique, how should you do this? By the way, people in voice chat, if you have anything to add to what I'm saying, just say it before I go on rambling over stuff that you disagree with.
I think, kind of from what I've seen in the paleo community, the reason, or at least one of the reasons, that people are so quick to jump at critique is that people are like really excited about these animals, which is great.
Yes.
But then they kind of, in that excitement, forget about all the other stuff. Like,
yes,
for example, the platform they're on.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that is like good to keep in your mind when you get, excited or annoyed or whatever at a piece of art that you'd like to comment on.
Yeah. But also when you receive critique, because you have to keep in mind we are dealing with people that are very passionate about these subjects.
Mm-hmm.
So just dismissing stuff is also not the best way to go about this. But now we are at how to give critique. Oh wait, or Zach, did you have something?
No, I don't have too much more to add at this immediate moment.
So.
I'll get to mine later because you said you'll be talking about separating the artist.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's something very important for me. Specifically.
Really quick, are we going to talk about the source of critique? Because I have something on that specifically.
We have it in here, I think, but I think only a little bit. So any input from that side would be very welcome.
All right, when we get to that bullet point, then.
Yeah. So first point here. good critique does not mean that it has to be all positive, or a bad critique is also not doesn't need to be all negative, because critique is a neutral term and doesn't mean giving a critique is not something inherently bad. It's just giving your opinion on something in a way that should be well constructed usually, but also often that's not the case. So something that we mentioned earlier, does the artist want critique, is an important point that you should consider. But also when you're going into a critique, try to think about stuff like, what does the artist even want with its piece? And in paleo art, that not always means that it's about science education. Most people see paleo art as a way of science communication, but it can be so much more, and it's something that only slowly gets more and more discussed and discovered in a way by the community. So when you look at a piece, think about, does this artist really want to have it 100% accurate, or do they go strive for something different, which can be the case more than you think. So that's why I also try to see the piece through the artists. I try to get into their shows and what appeals in this piece to them. So stuff like, should I critique the anatomy, is one of the questions you should ask yourself, and then see if and if you are not sure what the purpose of the piece is, ask. That's costing you no money. Yeah, as you can see here in the next part. Also, what kind of audience this is targeting at plays into this. So if you have something, dinosaurs in Disney style, for example, this will not be targeted at the Jurassic Park fanboys, for example. This is for a completely different audience, and so critiquing it based on the same standards as you would apply to a very technical illustration of a new dinosaur or to some Jurassic Park fan art is completely different. Next point here, you should be clear about what you critique, what you want to critique, the points that rub you the wrong way, or where you know, okay, these proportions are wrong, or stuff like that. This is oftentimes rather easy in paleo art, you would think, because there's all this literature you can base your stuff on, but at the same time, we also oftentimes fall into the trap of only critiquing stuff like anatomy, proportions, stuff like that, because we are so trained to do that. Although we could also go into stuff like composition, colors, lighting, all these things. And so this example here that was so wonderfully put together some time ago about, so actually it would be like that and that, is not just a parody of what the paleo community, how the paleo community likes to critique oftentimes, but also what we oftentimes critique without really looking at the other aspects of an art piece, because it can be that your artwork is absolutely up to date, up to the minute, even scientific wise, but then it's maybe absolutely boring, or there are weird tangents in your piece that totally fuck up the composition and stuff. And that is also something that is worthy to critique.
May I add to this?
Sure.
So I think basically what you're suggesting, Joshua, is critiquing not just in terms of the hard science and the likes, but also critiquing it as art, critiquing it as you would a more, I don't know, a more traditional art piece of, say, a portrait or something like that,
Yes.
or a landscape.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And again, that kind of depends on where the artist is coming from as well.
True.
Of course.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are all things to keep in mind before you rush to the keyboard and type in your no, it's not like that. Read that and that paper, and yeah, you got it all wrong.
Well, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Try to avoid that.
all that stuff that's happening, or just people. I had something yesterday on Facebook where somebody was critiquing a piece that showed an Alamosaurus getting attacked by T-Rexes, and it was just one word: anachronism. And so I was in a funny mood and just commented with nope, because they obviously meant that no, large sauropods and T-Rex never lived together, which is not the case. We know that they overlapped in time and space, so and they were like, you know nothing what this word means, obviously, and you don't even know how to write your own name, which was really weird. Yeah.
They were that sort of person.
Yeah. And of course, with everything, when somebody throws out bullshit, you need a multitude of the same energy that was put into that bullshit to refute it. So I wrote a quite a bit longer paragraph after that. But yeah, we are getting off topic. But I did it all very polite. Except that one first note, just to parodize his one-word critique, basically.
Fighting trash with trash.
In a way, because I found this rather rude to be like under this piece that somebody put a lot of work into, obviously, be like, oh, anachronism. Oh. But this leads nicely into the next point here. What kind of language and tone do you use? And it is really difficult oftentimes and to bring something across correctly, especially the finer tones of language, because it's all written usually online, at least. I mean, we are sitting here together in voice chat, and it's a lot easier already, but we don't even see our facial expressions and stuff. That all falls to the side. But at least we have our intonation and these sorts of things, and stuff like irony and sarcasm are getting across. And that's really difficult to convey, of course, when you do this all in written language. Emojis can help. I always encourage the use of emojis because that can help a lot to clarify the meaning of your works if you mean it, for example, in a jokey way. And that's one of my main problems, for example, with YouTube chat, the YouTube comment section, that there are no emojis, because I think many of these weird discussions that happen in YouTube comments could be avoided if there were emojis to clarify the meaning of the words. So that's that. Next point here would be self-reflect. Do you give somebody a harder time because you don't like them? This is something that I mentioned earlier with disconnecting artwork and the artist behind it. Because I have seen many times people posting their work and then one of them getting a far harsher critique because people that give critiques don't like the people behind the artwork personally. Even friends of mine I have seen giving very harsh critiques to people where I'm like, but hey, that other guy here did something very similar, and you gave them far less hard time than this guy now. So, do you see what's going on here?
Yeah, and this will play into more relevance in a later part of the talk, won't it? Of the document.
No, this is actually the main part where this comes up. So if
Oh, right.
Oh,
Yeah.
I have a point on this.
yes, please.
Oh.
Yeah,
And
so
be
this kind of
seen.
falls into the situation of critiquing your friends versus critiquing strangers, where
Absolutely.
people tend to be a lot
Yes.
harsher on strangers than their friends.
Yeah.
And this is another thing, you can separate the art from the artist in this way, where if you're giving honest critique, you need to consider, am I not saying things because I know this person, or am I being harder on this person because I don't know them?
Yeah.
Within the art.
Yeah. In both cases, you do a disservice to that person, to the artist. Yeah. Keeping things that you see in your friends' work from them, because you don't want to hurt them, is also not really helping if you want your friends to develop skills and so yeah, honesty is important, and I know it is very hard sometimes to be honest to friends when you notice something in their work and you are like, this could be so much better.
Oh, and this is especially true when you're doing in-person critique.
Yes.
In a classroom setting, nobody wants to talk because you're usually surrounded by friends and people you know.
Yeah. As nice as
it
in
takes a
person
lot
is.
to
Yeah.
get there. It
Yeah.
takes a lot to be able to overcome that and start giving honest critique. And of course, knowing how to give critique makes it easier. But that's something I figured out, is to just, whether it's in a classroom setting or whether you're hanging out with your friends, just be honest, but try to be as positive as possible.
Yeah.
Because people remember that, even though you're not intending to hurt their feelings or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to unintentionally humiliate someone in front of a load of others or something like
Yeah.
that.
Although sometimes people want, and that's the other.
yeah.
That's of course the other side of the coin. That there
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
intentionally malicious critiques towards people that are not liked by someone, and yeah. So that's why I think it's really important to self-reflect on your intentions with your critique. Do you really want to help somebody, or do you want to humiliate them or beat them down, or do you want just to show off, which can also be the case. That I have seen this a lot online in paleo art discourses, where people are just barging in with all these technical terms and stuff like that, and it's sometimes also really hard to resist putting just dumping all your knowledge on someone. But then I have also seen it in personal critique rounds, where are just people coming in and name dropping 100 artists, being like, oh, look at that, and the philosophy of that author is so interesting, and blah 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 blah, basically lecturing you, and it's not helping at all, because you can't remember all that stuff, and it's not oftentimes not really relevant to the piece that is discussed. So keep this in mind when you do this. Also keep in mind the platform you are on, because if you want to give somebody a really detailed critique, maybe it's not the best place to do that. Like, I mentioned that earlier. Twitter is a platform for short messages, and if you want give somebody a really detailed description of like the anatomy of a dromaeosaur wing, you can't do that in one tweet. So what instead happens is all these this is wrong comments, because you also, as this is something I wish that was possible, you can't have a common thread. You can't just put one comment after another without any connection, and so any kind of critique on Twitter becomes short and mostly rubbish. So the alternative, of course, would be to personally approach people, but also then keep in mind that you might need more time. And if you don't have the time, why even try to critique?
And if you try to kind of dump a lot of information, I feel at least on Twitter, if you do like a whole thread as a response to someone's art, then again that will feel a little weird to the person who's receiving it.
Yes.
Because it's just so much information being dumped on you.
Absolutely.
It feels a bit rude.
Yeah.
It's definitely a consideration.
Yeah, having been on the receiving end of one such info dump, it did not encourage me to carry on with my work. In fact, it significantly cooled my passion for attempting to learn a new way of doing art. So from personal experience, I can say take it slow, assess the person's level of skill, and just don't go into fact spewing mode. It's really tempting. It's really tempting to show off, especially if it's something you have expertise in.
Yeah. Or even if you don't want to show off, but have all this information that you could give somebody. As Gray said, take it slow. Don't info dump on people. Consider who's sitting in front of you, how much they might be able to take in, and also that it might be potentially hurtful, even if you do it politely, to dump so many information on somebody, because you might see all these different anatomical flaws, but if you would all point them out, the whole image would basically redlined to obscurity. So taking it one step at a time and hoping that the artist on the other side is maybe getting where you're coming from, and gently pushing them into the direction that might work better for their work.
To build on that, there's a pretty good way to slide into like being able to highlight structures, especially with somebody who doesn't really know the technical terms. And it's mostly starting out by breaking it down breaking it down structure by structure, and starting off with one thing and saying, like if you're looking or if they are looking for critique, and you say, well, this structure, which is called the blank, it looks like, or could use, or could be adjusted a little, something like that. Not just to go into this structure blank is wrong, this structure blank is, and just continuing on and on and on.
Yeah. Exactly.
One thing that I don't think it was touched on earlier, but it was mentioned in the document, was the a style of critique that seems to be fairly common, I think, but probably bears repeating here, is the so-called sandwich technique of critique, whereby it's the classic give something positive and then give a slightly more critical bit of feedback, as the case may be. And I think one of the main reasons why doing it in this sort of one piece at a time thing is, if you start off with an immediate negative saying, this is wrong and this is why, it can automatically put people on the defensive, and means that if nothing else, they will be less likely to listen to you. This goes double
That
if
is true. Yeah.
if this goes double if the way that it's written is very blunt or rather coarse, for want of a better term.
Yeah,
and if nothing else,
I'm familiar with the sandwich method. I'm not the biggest fan of it, because when you sandwich a compliment, a negative point between two compliments, it often feels like this. Oh, this is nice, but and therefore the negative point sometimes bites more.
I see.
But yeah, I feel like this has to be evaluated case by case. But on the point of compliments, please, people, give people compliments, especially when you see people grow in their art, when they improve their skills or their knowledge, when you notice how their composition has changed, stuff like that. Because as many of the audience will be artists here and will know it, we tend to beat ourselves up over our own work, and getting positive feedback from outside that tells you, yes, you have improved, even if you can't see it yet. But yes, your stuff has become better over the last few months or years even. Everybody learns at their own pace. That can be incredibly important to somebody's self-worth, I think. And even if it doesn't improve somebody's self-worth, I think it's just a nice thing to do. And so, yeah, if your intent with your critique is really to help somebody with their the improvement of their art, then we also should maybe talk about how you can give help to somebody with tools like referencing, or actually taking the time to point out graphically on their pieces, okay, maybe do it like that. Giving them links to literature or recommendations to it, or just linking a tutorial sometimes can help absolutely, if you put it in a nice written sandwich of hey, I looked at your work and I noticed this and this, and the overall idea I really like, but maybe look at this video and it will clarify some stuff for you, or maybe something for the future. Because you have to also, I think that's something that is often assumed these days, where most paleo artists work digitally, that we will immediately jump back to the digital canvas and just correct everything what we just got critique on. And many of us don't really want that. They just want to have this piece finished, shelved to the side, because it's always a big question. Okay, when is a piece really finished? So having this, you should probably also consider, when you give critique, if you want to give the critique for the piece now in front of you, or basically as something for the artist to keep in mind in the future. It's easier when you, of course, talk about work in progress, because then everything is still fluent. But yeah. Okay. Any points on this block here? Otherwise, we would go to the next big part.
I could raise a point that was said in the chat by...
Oh yeah, let's have a look at the chat before we go
Impulse says, don't miss a person's effort because the result wasn't what you wanted. And I think that kind of brings it back to the what is the artist trying to achieve? Like, are you seeing the piece through their eyes and kind of relating to what they want to do, instead of what you think would work, how you would construct that piece, because everyone obviously does it differently. So I thought that was a very good point.
Yeah, I know in our discussions about how to construct this lecture that we discussed reading the room.
Yeah.
And looking at all of the surroundings of an art piece can also clue you in on what an artist intends with their piece. Because not everybody is going to be aiming for hyper-realistic or scientifically accurate. Sometimes a person is making a piece of art because they want to make a piece of art.
Mm-hmm. Self-expression instead of trying to depict something very rigid scientifically.
Yeah.
For sure.
The topic is the same, but the meaning is very different.
Yeah. Oh, Natalia brings up a nice point here that academia has its own term for bad critique, and that's dealing with awkward peer reviewer too. I have heard a lot of stories in that direction, so that really appears to be a thing. Okay, next big block in this is how to receive critique and how to deal with it. So we go back to some of the essentials that we covered early on, with in this case not asking if somebody wants critique, but if you want critique, how to ask to get critique, because it's when you just give somebody your artwork and be like, oh, please give me a critique, this can be overwhelming, especially when the person that wants to is supposed to critique you sees this whole bucket list of things that could be improved. So know what you want to improve on. Sometimes also be honest to yourself and try to figure out what are your strengths and weaknesses. Very important, especially, is don't just go fishing for compliments, but also be willing to grow as an artist and acknowledge critiques that you got, even if it might feel bad or humiliating, even, which it shouldn't, but that's how our brains sometimes work. Even if the thing was brought over very kind and polite and everything, it can still, of course, cause mental damage, you might say, because we as artists get attached to our work.
Exactly.
Sorry, Ida?
It can be a very delicate thing.
Yes.
Just because you just pour so much into the skill that you have and the pieces and stuff, that you really do get attached. And like, even as a professional, it can still sometimes feel pretty bad.
Yeah.
If I may add a couple of things, Fracas pointed it. Tying into that, there's also something Impulse has mentioned, which is that he mentions a couple of things to bear in mind, and that is that it is rarely the case that everyone is out to get you in terms of their critique, but at the same time, to be aware that not everyone is necessarily there to help you. And that ties into something that I had in mind about this, and that's that for them, I suppose this comes par for the course with it being, the internet and social media and all that stuff. But by virtue of the fact that people can leave public posts on all this sort of stuff, people can leave an innocuous, or what they think is innocuous, I should say, comment in 1 minute, and for them, they will probably never think about it again. but that is not necessarily the case for the person receiving the comment.
Absolutely.
I think this ties into the general trend that ties into the general thing we've mostly been getting at here, in that most quote unquote bad or potentially troublesome critique isn't intentionally malicious so much as it may be thoughtless.
Yeah, thoughtless and rushed and yeah. And of all the other problems that were mentioned earlier with the info dumping and showing off is also fairly common. The really malicious, intentionally bad critique is not really the problem. It's more the lack of self-reflection that we see day in and out. But because it is oftentimes not malicious, it is also important to not directly go into defensive mode when you get a bad critique, but maybe also try to understand the person that gives you a critique and not directly giving them a hard time, although you might disagree with the critique or the way it was given.
So Joshua, forgive me, but I kind of lost which bullet point we've on. I do have something to add to the overall. I could have sworn we had this as a bullet point, but consider the source of the critique when you're receiving it. Because somebody who's being a bit of a loudmouth on the internet, they might know what they're talking about, but somebody who is an expert, somebody who has experience with whatever it is, can probably give you more valuable critique.
Yeah, the loudest voices are not necessarily the most helpful or the most yeah.
Yeah, that said, there is a little bit of a reciprocal. Even if an expert does critique you, you don't necessarily have to roll over for them.
Absolutely. I mean, even
experts can be wrong.
Yeah, experts can be wrong, and experts can be assholes.
Yes. So if an expert is giving you critique, don't completely roll over. Don't take it. I wouldn't say don't take it at face value is a terrible thing to say, but respect the expertise behind it, but be able to stand up for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something which was wonderfully shown just 2 days ago, basically with the whole singer surrounding Scipionics and other compsognathids and the whole Sinosauropteryx to Eutyrannus, where everybody's jumping on it without really looking into the science behind it, or in the Eutyrannus thing, one comment that was posted by a respected researcher, but nonetheless, it's just an idea that is out there. It's not peer reviewed, and there was no direct observation of the specimens by these researchers yet, and all these things. So you, it can be very tricky. Then there's stuff like how to tell someone is not being genuine with their critique. I put this point in, but I'm not quite sure how. Okay, yeah, but stuff like not offering any help for fixes. Only trying to pick the piece apart, trying to elevate self instead of the artist. or the artwork. It's something you can look out for when you want to decide if the critiques that is given to you is trying to help you or not. And here we have a few points listed of stuff that is not a critique. Stuff that you should ignore or maybe even go after with a ban if you want to. Because attacking somebody personally, their skill level, their style choices, personality, appearance, etc. That
The
is
spelling
not
of their
critique.
name.
The spelling of their name, yes, yes. Also stuff like I here, which you sometimes see. It's rare, but it happens. I can do this better, which most of the time happens when the artist is not present, but more behind their back. I have noticed. And then comparisons. When you get something that looks at first like critique, but just turns out to be like, oh, these and these and these artists did it better. That's not helping at all. And you should probably ignore that. Sometimes it can be interesting to look into these name-dropping lists, like maybe you find a new inspirational source in there, but most of the time it's just like, bleh, forget about it. Also, same is with bullying is a thing that can happen, and especially a problem these days on Twitter and or Facebook, dogpiling on somebody. Somebody maybe did a overall really nice piece, but there's one crucial mistake in there, and like having the wrong hand posture on your big favorite theropod, and then 10,000 people in the comment sections are going after that one detail, and that can be soul crushing when somebody isn't used to it, and that's not really critique, because these people just want to be smart asses to point that out and didn't take 2 seconds to look into the comment section to realize, oh, somebody already did that. So best is just to ignore that stuff. It's really hard to say this, but all this talk about growing a thick skin or grow up, as bad as these comments are, it is really good to grow a thick skin, especially on the internet.
I think there's a reciprocal to that. Not only the whole growing a thick skin, but also understanding when you need to not say anything.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, I have another point for that as well. And that's especially true if you're working on something and you feel like someone else is making something better or doing something that you're doing better. That's something, jealousy is something that can influence people's critiques.
Absolutely.
I have run into situations where someone has tried to put down my work because they're working on something else that's very similar.
Yeah, this goes back to this whole getting artist and artwork together, or rather not to critique artwork not based on the artwork the artist behind it.
If I may add to the whole dogpiling thing, kind of linking to what's already been said earlier, that I feel like some of these dogpiling incidents, they're not even deliberate on the part of the dogpilers per se.
Oh yeah, I mean, oftentimes that's just people not taking the time to look into the comment sections if somebody similar was already mentioned.
Yeah, and again, it's the whole sort of takes about a minute to compose a comment, something like that, and means nothing to them. but
Yeah.
it could really impact the person receiving the comment.
Yeah. Yeah. Your 1 minute comment on Twitter might contribute to years of therapy at worst. That's something that happened. Or it could lead to somebody giving up art completely, or at least paleo art.
Mm-hmm.
We have examples of this, where people constantly got dogpiled for minor details in their artwork and then stopped doing paleo art because they felt the community was gatekeepy, overwhelming in their amount of giving critique. And that's one of the reasons why we have the stream, to minimize these occurrences.
I do think there's a nice comment in the chat by, do you prefer to go by Lord Trilobite or Olaf?
Yes.
But he says that when he wants to give critique, he has a hard time finding the right words. Yes, I did get the pronouns correctly. So he ends up not saying anything, even though he does think he has something to add to the conversation. And slowing down like that is kind of what we're talking about in these dogpiling situations. Just taking the moment to stop, think things through, and then decide if what you have to contribute is worth contributing. Where am I going with this exactly? The initial slowdown is a good thing, but working through it and then coming up and finding the right words can be really difficult, and I acknowledge that.
Yeah. Yeah, the slowing down, the self-reflecting is absolutely a good thing. And yeah, if we don't find the right words, it's oftentimes just better to not say anything. Because the alternative could be hurting somebody. But yes, it is of course something. If you're always concerned about hurting somebody's feelings, that is also not a good thing in the long run. That is, and it's something that we don't cover in here, but that might be interesting for discussion after the stream, or if you have something to add now.
I think that to some extent this may be anecdotal from my case, but from just my admittedly limited observations and times on some of these platforms. But I feel like it's sometimes easier to ask permission to give feedback on some platforms than it is on others, by virtue of what those platforms are like. I mean, if you look at YouTube comments, for example, you tend to have, this may just be by virtue of the things I've watched, but I've noticed people tend to reply less to YouTube comments than they do to, say, Twitter posts or Facebook posts. So I don't know. I guess it also could depend on where it is you are asking permission as well. Can potentially make things a little bit trickier in some cases. I'm just speculating here, though.
Sorry, I came up with a better way of phrasing what I was thinking earlier. To Olaf. Sorry, there is a craft to critique, so wanting to add something and then finding that you don't have the words for it, yeah, that's rough. But setting aside a little bit of time to maybe puzzle out those words is not in itself a bad thing. I think if you don't respond immediately, the artist isn't going to be hurt by that. So taking a little bit of extra time to slow down, think things through, find those words, and come up with a nice carefully crafted critique is going to be way more helpful in the long run.
Yeah, I think actually what Zach mentioned to when you don't know what to say, ask for permission to give critique can really help, because then an initial hurdle is broken. In a way, you are already communicating, and I think from there the next step, actually going down to critiquing, can be much easier. But that is just my point of view. Everybody has their own preferences,
And there are also
ways.
other ways of, critiquing a piece, not just verbally, but like redlining, like you mentioned, just like drawing on top of it with a permission, of course.
Yeah.
Kind of pointing out with maybe arrows and a couple words in the piece. Even that can be so helpful.
Yeah.
If it's and I think redlining kind of gives you permission to be a bit more blunt, because you're like communicating very effectively, but it doesn't have the tone of text. You already have a permission to kind of efficiently point things out.
Yeah. And it might be a good idea to not always use red lines, because that always comes off as aggressive.
Yes.
It's something that we're used to from school and bad memories. Oh, the trauma, it comes back.
Personally, I prefer a pink or a powder blue.
Nice. Good choice.
Yeah, just use what is Brennan using always?
Turquoise.
Turquoise. Oh wait, no. What was the specific tone? Teal. Yes. Just use teal for everything.
You're all wrong. Orange is clearly superior.
That comes from the red salamander here.
We don't talk about that.
May I also
Incorrect.
circle back?
It is green.
Circle back a little bit to
like
the growing a skin kind of thing, and also related to asking permission to give critiques. I think as an artist, and not just as an artist, but as a person, it's very. I also hope my microphone isn't horrible.
It's okay.
But it's a really good skill to learn to say no. If you do not want to critique on your piece, it is completely fine to say that. Please do not critique me. If someone asks if they can critique your piece, you can say no, and they will hopefully not critique it after that. I feel like there can be a bit of pressure if someone asks if they can critique your piece, because then it feels to you like they've found a flaw or something in it. And even that alone can feel a little bad, but it is completely fine to say no, and it's a very good skill to learn to be comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think, Ida, that part of the reason why there may be an expectation to receive critique is because, well, it's sort of, there's the mindset of you post this art piece on a public platform for public viewing, therefore anyone can therefore have any opinion they want about it. Could that mindset play into it a bit?
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. That especially social media platforms, I think, tend to have this. Interestingly, I feel like as much as Slack as DeviantArt got for its redesign and everything, I never really had the same discussions on DeviantArt about accuracy as I had on Twitter or Facebook, because it never really it always had this feeling of a gallery at the same time as it was a social media platform. I feel that toned it sometimes down, but maybe that's just also my experience, because I heard some horror stories from from DeviantArt as well. And I always was good at avoiding drama on DeviantArt, so who knows. Okay, next point here is you got a good critique. What now? So after getting all this bad stuff out of the way, you maybe got a good constructive critique of your work, and you can work with this maybe. So first thing you could do is take notes, for example, because they can be useful for the future, especially when it's on something that is already finished. And it's maybe a big oil painting, and going in with wet paint again would ruin it. Or you can just acknowledge the critique. You might disagree with it, because critique is also oftentimes subjective. But acknowledging it as what it is can help. And when you're still working on some stuff, you can, of course, fix your work. That is something that is totally possible if the fixes that were proposed go in the direction you want your piece to go. Like, if you wanted to have your piece very stylized, for example, it might be not the best idea to take every advice on anatomy. But that is something that everybody has to decide for themselves. And to just say thank you is also something that can be really good, because it breeds a certain community climate in which constructive criticism is valued and welcomed. And saying thank you to somebody who gave you maybe not a completely positive critique, but one that is constructive and that you can work with, can encourage more of such behavior, especially when it happens openly, so people can see that you verbally reward such efforts. Yeah. And with that, we come to our last bigger point here. Or has somebody else something on that?
Oh, I do.
Oh, nice.
An in-person critique, something that I always thought that was like something that should have been mandatory, was at least like a notepad or something to write things down, because a lot of the times people just wouldn't listen or take notes or be as receptive to it, and you'd see it in the final product. But that does also lean into the point of, you don't always need to listen to critique if it addresses something that's not your target, or that's not what you're doing. Because if you're doing something stylized and somebody says this needs to be longer, that might completely ruin the point of the piece.
Yeah,
however,
a good critique.
Also attempt.
Yeah, I think we should.
You should also attempt to communicate it. You should also attempt to communicate what your goal is to somebody who's offering you critique as well. If they ask you like, oh, like, what is this for? Say it's like, it's a stylized piece, then that gives them the framing they need to help or to respond to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it's an important point to make, that a good critique is not necessarily an effective critique.
And something about like in-person critiques as well. That can be a very nerve-wracking situation for a lot of people. You're in front of a lot of people, and people are kind of looking at your work and talking about it. Taking notes in that situation will be really helpful, because I know, at least personally, I will just like blank. Like, I will not remember anything that was said afterwards. So taking those notes can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, taking notes is something that can calm you down, personally, because it's a moment of, okay, getting this on paper and in your brain, getting you a little bit away from the whole situation of standing in front of people and so on. So, yeah. But yeah, I have noticed quite a few times, even if that especially when you have people in your crowd critiquing you that love to name drop. And name dropping in itself isn't bad, but it remembering all these names for potential inspirations and so on afterwards is like a wait. Okay, that one guy I knew, but what were the other ones? Ah, God.
How do you mean when you say name dropping, Joshua?
It is when you study art or also design, and you are in a colloquium with people and they critique your art, it is oftentimes that there are a few more experienced students among them, maybe, that know a lot of artists. And so they look at your work and they remember that and that and that and that and that artist that did something similar, or might have a certain way of doing things that might be interesting for me to look at. And so there are people who constantly just drop names. And that can be very helpful, but it can also be intimidating and a little bit pointless, because when you don't take notes or don't have pictures in front of you, it doesn't tell you anything. So yeah, that's something that happens. That's less a problem in paleo art. But sometimes it happens when somebody is dropping a lot of not names but papers. Look at that paper, that paper, that paper, that paper, that paper, and you're just like totally overwhelmed by the situation. And I mean, when it's written, it's not that bad, because then you can at least look things up afterwards. But yeah. That's the thing.
I think that a similar situation would be, have you seen this publication that ends up being very obscure, very difficult to get a hold of? And it's like,
okay. yeah, and it's treated like common knowledge. It's treated like common.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That reminds me of specimen number dropping, as well.
Oh God, yeah.
For the uninitiated. So if you drop a bunch of specimen numbers,
especially if it's not labels, a T-Rex and you can't find it by a quick Google search,
they're not going to understand what that string of letters and numbers even means.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. At least offering together with that number a photo is something that would be nice in such situations. But that's also something you can ask for.
Mm-hmm. Offering tools with your critique.
Yeah, offering tools with your critique.
A paper, just maybe send it to them if you have it.
Yep.
Send pictures.
Yep, send pictures or a direct link, maybe a Sci-Hub link, so they don't have to ask around for it.
Yeah, even a screenshot of the specific part that you're talking about, if it's something that can be read quickly. Yeah.
But then also you should keep in mind maybe who you are talking to when it's a beginner paleo artist who doesn't know how to filter out important information from a paper. Maybe break the information down to them. And that's goes back to this info dropping stuff. Okay, last part of this whole stream here is the case that sometimes we mess up and we hurt people with our critique, or just by being an asshole. But there are, of course, ways for damage control here. So we all I recently had such a case on a video of the delay designer under a video about Planet Zoo, but within that video they also talked about Jurassic World evolution, and they had some very from my point of view, horrible mistakes in there, and I more jokingly posted some of that in the comment section without really thinking about it, and that resulted in an anonymous call out post on Twitter in a way which I saw in hindsight and was like, oh shit, what did I do there? I basically was gatekeeping without the intention to do it. And so I wrote actually several apologies to her, and I would have loved to DM her, but that's not something she has enabled. But yeah, it's something that can happen, and it is important to recognize when that happens, and to take actions accordingly. Sometimes it's also just miscommunication, because of a typo, or it's not your English is not your first language, or it's not both your first languages, and you maybe there's a piece of jargon that was misunderstood. Stuff like that can happen, and then of course it's important to clarify this stuff. And if you really notice that the other party is hurt, to apologize and to acknowledge that you caused the other side pain, which I think is something that happens way too rarely, and should be trained more, because that's something that not happens naturally. And also, by apologizing, you should pinpoint, okay, what you did wrong. Also, because it might help in hindsight, when not everything about what you did was wrong, and some of your critique still might be helpful in the end. So critiquing itself in itself doesn't have to be hurtful in this case. Very, very important and very difficult for some people. Don't blame the people who received the critique with stuff like, I'm sorry you feel that way, which never really works well, because then you yes, pain is subjective, but by saying you feel this way, you basically say it's not that bad. So yeah, try to avoid that, or at least phrase it in a way that sounds better than that.
Right. You don't want to say it's not my problem that you were hurt by something I did.
Oh yeah. It sounds like a you problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The worst.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and also try to consider the nature and severity of the mental injuries you caused. So the apology should look accordingly. And don't just apologize to look good or to save your repetition or something. I mean, yes, that can help with that. But there are these beautiful apology videos by many celebrities after getting a shitstorm or something, where you're like, do you really mean that? But at the same time, you shouldn't, as somebody who receives an apology, don't go in and be like, oh, you don't mean it that way. Because you were never in the other one's skin. You can never truly know what they how they will feel about it. So giving people the benefit of the doubt is, I think, very, very important.
Yeah. I do want to elaborate a little bit on proportionality, just because I know it can be easy for me to lean into the fawning, especially if I've hurt somebody. Understanding the proportionality of the hurt and responding accordingly. If it's a minor infraction, a simple I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way, I won't phrase it like that again.
Yeah.
You're fine, especially among friends. If you really messed up, if you went after somebody, if you were out for blood, that's not going to cut it, one. And second, even if you do craft a really good apology, you might not be able to reestablish trust immediately. It might take a while to build yourself back up to that person. So don't be surprised if it takes a while to reestablish that trust.
Absolutely. Yeah, don't expect to be everything good again. Acknowledge that that building trust takes time, especially after hurting someone, or might never come again.
Yeah,
Also
somebody
possible.
might decide to cut contact with you entirely.
Yeah,
and if that happens, there's not a lot you can do about it.
Especially when they block you.
Just try to take it in that maybe you were in the wrong. You can't apologize to them directly, but you can learn from it.
And don't go around being like, oh, I will report you to the police for blocking me.
Oh no.
That's a way to say it.
Also, is that a thing?
Oh, go. That's a reference that I will not elaborate on.
Also, like, don't go after them on an alternative account or something.
Yes,
because you feel bad that you messed up.
Do not evade a block.
You may have 72 alternative accounts, but you don't need to use them. Just move on with it. You have better things to do than to hunt someone down.
Don't beg for an approval to your apology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Doesn't look good, doesn't work, and it's a shitty move. Also, don't hunt people down in their personal life.
Yeah, don't cyberstalk people. That's an entirely different video altogether, but
absolutely,
just don't do that.
I mean, you could make several follow-ups on this whole theme. It's branching out a lot, but yeah. But yeah, this is basically everything we wanted to talk about, and I wanted to present, for those who don't know it yet, a little bit of a solution that we want to craft here on the PaleoStream server, and that is a restructure of our Paleo channel section. Because you see on this side here the current channel structure. We have down here the PaleoStream Flightschool, which will remain. We have Paleo Art of the Month, where members can post the paleo art that they observed in the wild that they liked the most. Julian's Eden will remain, a paleobotany channel, as well as Paleo News and Paleo General, although these might move into a specific science section with an additional channel for other sciences like biology, geology, astronomy, stuff like that, where people can just discuss stuff besides paleontology. But the things here in the middle, where we have finished work, work in progress from the stream, consulting hours, and non-stream art and whips, this will all change because non-stream art and whips no longer really serves a specific purpose. Consulting hours died down quite a bit, so we will merge it actually with PaleoStream Flightschool here. So if you want critiques on your work specifically, you can post it in here, and so everybody will know. And maybe also post it with a little sentence like, "Hey, can you guys give me advice on this?" Keep in mind also to specify what you want critique on sometimes when it's a complex piece, especially. Like, do you want critique on your composition or your anatomy, your lighting, stuff like that? And we will actually have a second finished work channel here that is specifically for works that you don't want critiques on. Because I think that was something that was brought up a few times. There are these tendencies in the community, especially in social media, to just wildly give critiques to everything that is posted without really thinking about it. And so the best way I could think to a partial solution to this is to have a specific channel where you just don't give critique. Where you just post and that's in, and all discussions and so on can happen in a second finished work things where people can post stuff that can be critiqued. So when you post in finished work 2, you will you basically give consent to getting critiqued. Same with the work in progress channel, where you which we will not have a second version of for stuff to not critique, because having work in progress, why would you post work in progress if you don't want critique, basically? I mean, maybe some that happens with some people, but we also don't want 10,000 channels on the server to keep it a little bit better organized. So yeah, that's something we want to establish on the server today or tomorrow. Yeah, some of these channels will actually stay as they are. They will be archived at the bottom of the server for stuff to find, at least for some time. Yeah, that's one of the things we want to do from our side, besides these streams, to encourage a better community climate. Yeah, and if nobody from the discussion group now has something to add to this, we, I think, can close the stream.
I think I'm good.
Oh yeah, and we should maybe look into chat if somebody has questions.
Oh yeah, last questions would probably be a good thing.
Yeah. Jeremy Raptor, the channels will be archived. Or at least some of them. For example, finished work and so on will probably be just be renamed for now. Thank you, Johnny. Oh, and Natalia, I agree. Sometimes 2 or 3 a.m. on Twitter, you just write some nonsense and you realize it much later, the next day, how much you messed up. So yeah, that's certainly something to keep in mind. Also, when you get something like this as a comment and you notice, hey, on their side of the world, it's very early in the morning, they might not be completely in their right mind when they wrote that. So yeah. In general, keeping human nature in mind when dealing with critique, I think, is a very important thing.
Mm-hmm. And I really think just when you give a critique, want the other person to grow. Like, approach it with good faith.
Yeah.
And kind of a very positive attitude. That really, I think, is like the first step in giving a good critique.
Okay. I think we reached the end of this. We will have something little for the people on Discord after the stream. But for now, thank you all for being here, and see you potentially tomorrow for a regular Paleo stream, where we'll do some prehistoric creatures.
Paleo art.
Exactly. Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.
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 Long.
And thank you for the fish.